In today's brief video, I want to take a moment and discuss the role of dopamine with regard to addiction, specifically to nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content, substances that I once struggled with. When you consume a drug, no matter what that drug is, nicotine, THC, energy drinks, pornography, cocaine, your brain is going to release a neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter is dopamine. Dopamine, when released, motivates us to repeat a behavior over and over again. Dopamine is also responsible for feelings of joy, feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, and our ability to learn new things. So dopamine is a very important neurotransmitter. Now, here's the problem with drug addiction, though. When you repetitively consume a drug over and over and over again, we sort of burn out our dopamine centers in our brain. And we actually wind up with chronic drug use in the state of dopamine deficit. And this might be why some people who are suffering from alcohol, for myself when I was suffering from nicotine, THC, energy drink, and adult media content addiction, we start to lose our drive. We start to lose our motivation in life for things. And that has to do with the fact that we're in a state of a dopamine deficit. And when you quit using a drug, you're certainly in a state of even more dopamine deficit. Now, what does that do? What does a dopamine deficit create? Well, it creates lack of motivation, but it's also responsible for cravings. The pain that we feel physically and psychologically when we crave a drug, a craving, is caused by being in a state of a dopamine deficit. Now, what can we do to correct this? And before I give you guys the options, which we're going to talk about supplementation and lifestyle modification, I want everyone watching this to pick up a copy of the book, Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lembke. I put the link for the book below in the video description and in the pinned comment because it goes into way more detail on this than I ever could. But some proposed solutions to this. You can either pursue pain, or you can do a dopamine fast, or you can look at adding supplementation into either one of those categories. Category number one, pursuing pain, you have three options. Option number one would be taking a cold shower. Cold showers have been shown to boost dopamine between 100 and 200% post cold shower. So next time you get a craving, next time you're sitting in your house really wanting to smoke weed at night, try taking a cold shower. Personally, I did this for a little stint during my early recovery process, right after I would work out at the gym. The second option that you have is instead of exposing your body to cold, you could expose your body to heat. You could do this through vigorous exercise, or you could do this by going to a sauna and sitting there and quite literally sweating it out. Now, I just want to say a caveat for those of you guys quitting cannabis when it comes to vigorous exercise, especially if you're suffering from Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome. Vigorous exercise for me was completely out of the question in my early sobriety process because I was physically so ill. And anytime I would exercise vigorously, weightlifting, intense running, I would become much sicker. Physically, my body would go into extreme pain. My central nervous system would react very, very poorly. So exercise for you early on might look like swimming, going for a walk, or doing some light yoga exercise. Another option to help boost dopamine is through intermittent fasting. When you are fasting, you are kind of going through the physical discomfort of hunger, but if you fast for long enough, your body's actually going to start to produce more dopamine. And that's one of the main reasons why people say fasting is such a rewarding experience, because of the dopamine spike that you get after several hours of a fast. For me, my fast was I'd stop eating around 7 p.m. at night, and then I wouldn't eat the next day until noon. Now, of course, if you're already in a position where you're severely malnourished due to addiction, intermittent fasting may not be the best option for you because the last thing we want you to do is become further malnourished. So just something to keep in mind, a little caveat on fasting. But those are three ways that you can pursue more pain or discomfort that are actually going to result in pleasure through a dopamine spike after completing those activities. Me personally, I was doing a combination of those three things in my early sobriety process. Now, another way that you could try and increase dopamine naturally, and Dr. Lemke talks about this a lot in her book and on other podcasts she's been on, is through a dopamine fast. And her recommendation is a 30-day dopamine fast. And this is where you abstain from any substances, and I put that in quotation marks, that release excessive amounts of dopamine. So this could be social media, this could be eating sugary junk foods, this could be watching pornography, gambling, smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol. The list goes on and on. It would be your responsibility to identify what those behaviors are and what behaviors you may need to abstain from. Now, I think a dopamine fast is a great thing. I know for me personally, I kind of had to go on a dopamine fast because anytime I smoked weed, I would smoke nicotine because I wanted to enhance that high, or I'd chew tobacco rather, or I'd hit my vape. Anytime I drank alcohol, I would always want to smoke weed afterwards because as the alcohol buzz would wear off, I'd want to reamp it up with the high from cannabis. Another very common thing I would do would be smoke weed and then consume or watch adult media content. And then after that, I would continue to smoke and then go into binging social media content. This, I think, was particularly dangerous, and I'd have a dip in my mouth while I was doing it. Particularly dangerous what I was doing, keeping my dopamine elevated for such an extended amount of time on so many different substances. And then, of course, the next day I would suffer from social anxiety, pretty crippling depression some days, physical intense body pain, myalgia, fibromyalgia-like symptoms, right? So I think you got to look at your activities, your day-to-day things, and say, what is it I need to cut out for the next 30 days in hopes of rebalancing my dopamine neurotransmitter levels in my brain? And again, that's up to you to determine. Now, you could also look into supplementation, and I'm going to name a few supplements, but of course, always speak to your doctor before starting any supplement or lifestyle program change. But just keep in mind, if you do get into supplements, supplements are supplemental to lifestyle modification and having the appropriate mindset when it comes to quitting weed. So many times I would jump into supplements thinking this is going to do it. This is the magic pill. This time I'm going to quit and I'm going to actually feel, better about quitting because of these supplements. And that was never the case. So I usually recommend supplementing actually after the first few weeks of your early sobriety. But some things to look into: L-theanine. Theanine is a building block amino acid for dopamine. And I believe a lot of people in this may be struggling, not because they're lacking L-theanine, but because they're lacking poor dietary choices. So focusing on foods like chicken, avocados, eggs, whole eggs, the yolk and everything, those foods are going to be really rich in, tyrosine is the building block, not theanine. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that correctly. It's either tyrosine or theanine. I have to double check this one now. But those foods are going to be really rich in those building block amino acids for dopamine production. So focusing on a higher protein diet, a diet that's, void of the sugars and the high fructose corn syrup, you're going to be better off when it comes to giving yourself those amino acids that dopamine relies on for its production. Now, another supplement you can look into, omega fatty acids, which are commonly found in fish like salmon, anchovies, sardines, or grass-fed red meat products. Steaks, ground beef, lamb, things like that are really rich in omega fatty acids, which are really important for brain function. And then lastly, when it comes to cravings, Dr. Amen, A-M-E-N of AMEN Clinics, I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, cites that he finds a lot of his patients do well with N-acetylcysteine or NAC, NAC. I believe he recommends 600 to 1200 milligrams a day, but references websites to learn more, amenclinics.com. And he says that that supplement seems to be a big benefit or help people, or research states it does, when it comes to managing cravings, which again, what's a craving? It's a dopamine deficit. Now, if you want to take all of this a step further when it comes to dopamine deficits and cravings, I would challenge you next time you're suffering from a craving to ask yourself, what is it that you're actually craving in life? What is the high that it is you are actually seeking? Because there's a good chance it's not porn, it's not nicotine, it's not weed. Is it better relationships, which will eventually lead to more dopamine? Is it a better financial situation, which can definitely lead to more dopamine? Is it better physical and mental health, which will definitely result in more dopamine? What activities should you be partaking in that satisfy your actual life cravings, not the cravings that are being crafted by that addicted voice in your head? And those are the things, those are the activities that I would focus on pursuing throughout your recovery process. But along the way, don't be shy about, trying out some of these simple tips and tricks. And if you want to learn more about dopamine, follow me into the next video where I have Dr. Lemke on a podcast talking to Andrew Huberman about dopamine production, Dr. Andrew Huberman, or go into the pinned comment, pick up a copy of the book. It's an incredible read. Or set up a one-on-one or join our group coaching consultations, which you can also find in the video description or the pinned comment below to learn more about this stuff and be part of a community supporting one another quitting nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content. I'll see you guys in one of those various avenues.